Hey, welcome to the channel. My name is Jason, and here I talk about all things story. And it is that time of the week again, ladies and gentlemen, where I craft another tale of 1,000 words exactly, inspired by a piece of artwork on the spot. So if you are new, that is what you shall expect. So if you enjoy fiction, if you enjoy writing yourself, you shall find something, I hope, to learn from, to admire, to hate. But let us move on to the music, what I listened to today, and that is probably my favorite ambient artist of all time. It's the first ones I discovered. He is called Lasso, and the album is called The Sales Part 1. You can find it on Bandcamp. You can find it on any streaming service. So I needed something that was atmospheric, definitely for this piece. You've seen the artwork. It's about a bridge. So let us look at that bridge a little bit more closely and check out this week's artwork. This week's artwork is titled Bridge, and it's by an art director and concept artist named Dmitry Vishnevsky from St. Petersburg, Russia. I selected this artwork because I'd been wanting to do an experiment for a long time, and that is personification. I'd found some really cool concept art of rooms or chambers, and I really wanted to tell the story of what that chamber was or what that room was based on what was inside. But as I was scanning down the art on ArtStation, the title Bridge showed up, and it really just made me stop, and I thought, well, how cool would that be? Something like a bridge where it's leading people or creatures or something else from place to place, and what an interesting story that might be. And so let us take a closer look. Well, we have a figure on a horse. It almost looks like he's holding a fishing pole. I think that's a string hanging down. I have no idea. It's even difficult to tell if this is fantasy, medieval, that style, or something more in the sci-fi, because that tower in the background could be made of stone. It also could be made of something else. Who is the man on the bridge? What is he doing there? Is he fishing, or is that some kind of weapon? I have no idea, but that is my job to find out. So, Dimitri, thank you for the inspiration. All right, well, let's see what I came up with. A horse clopped along the bridge, which evoked the memory of its birth. A slumber in mud, deep and timeless. Time meant nothing to the stones that nestled there when the river had been but a trickle. But now the bridge knew what time it was, so it could label that concept. Wake up, said calloused hands. It's time to grow up and move on, said a pickaxe. You'll do great things, said a mallet. You'll do terrible things, said a man. The stone became many at the hands of these men, separated, reconnected, and reshaped to itself and its brethren it didn't know it had. Hello, said the bridge. Hello, it answered. The trickle that would become a river became a creek. It played its music to the bridge as it passed beneath it, bringing all manner of thing. Leaves and twigs given new life, though they were severed. The bridge never knew the dead could move with such vitality. It wondered where they would end up, because it couldn't see far. The creek bent quickly and was hidden by the trees that hung low as if to drink from it. They would molt their dead from time to time, and if the bridge were lucky, they would do it upstream, so the bridge could see them running toward it as if they were its children. The bridge only had dead children, it seemed. If not leaves and twigs, then animals. A man with a stick upon the horse, upon the bridge, evoked the memory of a death like no other. A human child. The boy had been playing on the bridge with his fishing pole, which was only a branch with an imaginary line. The bridge wanted to tell him to be careful, to not get too close to the edge, because it knew the perils that lay beneath the mist and the mirrored surface of the creek that had grown to a river. Though the bridge tried to speak, it was made of stone. The boy sat on the edge with his feet hanging. He raised his pole like it was a sword, and it seemed to transform into that, because the boy stood and swung it and then spun in the other direction to thrust it like the bridge had seen men do across it, who had also fallen to their deaths. The bridge had been forced to look at their faces until the animals and bugs stripped them clean enough to be washed away. The bridge didn't want to look at the boy like that, not ever. But it was a particularly damp season, and moss had grown over the bridge like skin. It wasn't hard for the boy to find it. The bridge felt the boy's heels press hard and then slip. The bridge was forced to look at the boy fall with a look of confusion and fear, much like the child who had been born under its arch to a woman who lived there for some time. While that child was fearful of life, this boy was fearful of death, not because he knew it was to come, but because he didn't. The bridge knew. It watched, helpless, as the boy smashed his head on the rock, his eyes looking about calmly as blood trailed from his nose. His mouth moved as if to speak, but he didn't speak. Soon the boy's eyes stopped looking, and his mouth stopped trying to speak. The bridge watched him decompose as it had all the others. There were many years of stillness after the death of the boy, as if the world mourned its only son. The bridge savored the stillness, because it too mourned the boy. Nearly 100 years it took, the man upon the horse said. The voice of the man and horse upon the bridge evoked a memory of its family. When the snow cleared, they came, men with great machines that nearly separated the bridge, stone by stone, for that is what the machines carried. The bridge recognized some of the stones and spoke to them in the old ways. Some spoke back, some didn't. After a time, the bridge saw where its distant cousins were taken, to assemble a tower so tall only birds could reach it, and they did, flocking around its peak and perching upon its stones to be shooed away by men hiding in its nooks. Many came and walked across the bridge, man and woman and child and animal. Often the bridge saw the same ones pass back again. It was nothing like the bridge had ever known. The boots and wagon wheels and horse hooves cleared the stones of moss, even in the damp season. No children fell to their deaths. The river widened and raced with a ferocity the bridge had never witnessed. Mist tickled its underside, where it was fine for moss to grow, and grow it did, into great beards to rival those of the elder men who crossed it. The man and horse crossed the bridge to evoke the memory of its death. Chipped and bowed and moss-ridden, with a traffic and absence of traffic, of the people who had built and visited the great tower made of its cousins. It spoke to its cousins in the old ways, to tell them what was to come. Some denied the bridge, some didn't. Year after year, fewer of the living and the dead visited the bridge. And in that negligence, the concept of time was lost to the bridge. It lost the concept of waiting, of watching, of remembering. The river became a stream, a trickle, and then nothing at all. The bridge forgot its birth. It forgot its death because it was experiencing it now. Dry and buckling, and too much for its own weight, the bridge collapsed. Stone by stone, it returned to the mud. Sleep, said the mud. The bridge did not dream. The bridge did not wake. Welcome to the interviewer. I'm so glad you made it. This is where I talk about my final thoughts, what I liked, what I didn't like, what I learned, and then just try to tear this thing apart and give you my perspective, what was going through my head, what I was trying to do. So with that said, let us check out the writing itself. My first mistake here is actually in the very first sentence, and it is a very confusing sentence, especially after I read it aloud. And that is, a horse clopped across the bridge, which evoked the memory of its birth. So am I evoking the memory of the horse's birth or the bridge's birth? Well, if you've gotten through the story, if you listen to everything, you'll know I'm trying to personify this bridge. I'm trying to tell a story of the origin of this bridge and its ultimate demise at the very end. And the reason why I did that is I thought it would be cool to tell a story about an inanimate object because there's a lot of history there, right? We see roads, we see castles, we see bridges, we see all kinds of things. Well, I don't really see many castles where I live, but you always wonder who crossed those stones, those roads, those paths even. And I thought I would take that journey or try to experience that journey by personifying this bridge. So I began with a slumber and mud, deep and timeless. And this is an experiment I've been trying to do with my current novel, and that's kind of having dialogue, but not really dialogue. It's like communication through things that can't speak. I know it doesn't really make a lot of sense why I would do it. I think in the context of my novel it does, but anyway, here we have the building. This essentially represents the bridge being built by calloused hands, by a pickaxe, by a mallet, and then finally by a man upon completion. And one thing I tried to do, and I don't know if it was completely obvious, but I tried to have break apart the story with these different bits here. The first one introducing it, and then down here I have a man with a stick upon a horse. 'Cause, I didn't know what that was. It looked kind of like a fishing pole. He's evoking the memory of a death like no other, because as we learned, and this is kind of one of my regrets of the story too, you'll do terrible things. And so we learn about the death of this child who was just playing there on the bridge, and he slipped to his death. I don't really have any you'll do great things, unless I guess you could extrapolate the idea that it allowed passage to build this monumental, this tower in the background, or it could be that it allowed shelter for this woman who birthed this baby, which I briefly mentioned. But I think it would have been nice to actually use these things as story cues, to mark not only the passage of time, but maybe impactful scenes that I describe. And finally, we have the bridge waking up. "Hello," said the bridge. "Hello," it answered, because alas, the bridge is a very lonely thing out there in the forest. And then I start to build the scene from here on out. The trickle that would become a river became a creek. So before I get to the river part, I'm getting to the creek part. And this is when I introduce dead. We see these leaves and these twigs trickling down. And that is what this bridge gets to experience. And so sometimes it's animals even, and sometimes, unfortunately, it is a child. And the bridge only had dead children, it seemed, if not leaves and twigs and animals. And that essentially brings me to the next part, where this poor child dies. He's just playing there, slips on some moss, and just falls to his death. And this is also the section where I bring up the woman and the child right here, much like the child who had been born under its arch to a woman who lived there for some time. I think that would have been cool. Somehow, setting up the story or constructing it in such a way where I had those as parallels, right, or contrasts, where we have life, we have death, because in essence, that is exactly what these men who built it, this pickaxe and these mallets, told the tale of what this bridge is going to, or at least that's what the bridge assumed was going to happen based on those actions. And then finally, there are many years of stillness after the death of the boy, because it was morning. And then finally, the only piece of dialogue, real dialogue I have here, is the man upon the horse, who is talking about this tower that is rising in the distance. And I didn't really add any significance to it, other than, it was made of the cousins of the bridge. All of the stones that were found among the forest, or, wheeled here, excavated, whatever. And that would have been another opportunity, I think, for me to create some kind of reason, some reasoning, because we know this bridge has significance. What was the tower about? What does it do? Or maybe at the very least, mention that the tower was too far away for the bridge to speak to it to learn of its purpose. That would have been enough. And I think there's a lot of things you can do when you tell stories that solve these problems that readers might have, these questions that readers might have in their mind, with a single line. So I think sometimes you may feel that it is a very difficult thing to fix your writing, but oftentimes it's as simple as a single sentence. But eventually the bridge is crossed no longer. What was the fate of the tower? What was the fate of the people who lived in it? We do not know. We never know. Just that year after year, fewer of the living and the dead visited the bridge, and in that negligence, the concept of time was lost to the bridge. And so we're kind of stripping away the personification of this bridge, right? We're stripping away its humanity, its soul, whatever you like, turning it back into stone, bringing it back into the mud. And that's essentially what's happening. It's almost like, we're reversing the entire thing. So the river became a stream, a trickle, and then nothing at all. The bridge forgot its birth. It forgot its death because it was experiencing it now, dry and buckling too much for its own weight. The bridge collapsed, stone by stone. And then finally, the last word, semi-dialogue, was "sleep," said the mud. It might have been interesting if I said, welcome home, or maybe that's stupid too. I don't know. But because I began with the mud and ending with the mud, it would be kind of cool if the mud remembered the bridge. Or maybe the fact that the mud doesn't remember the bridge just speaks enough as far as the relationship or the lack of humanity that this inanimate object has. And finally, the bridge did not dream. The bridge did not wake. Grammatically, there was a very weird thing here, and this is this sentence, and I didn't really catch it until I I was reading it, but chipped and bowed and moss-ridden with the traffic and absence of traffic of the people who had built and visited the great tower made of its cousins. Wow, that was a mouthful. I had to read that quite a few times before I got it. But yeah, this is grammatically very strange, so I would definitely fix that. And then most importantly, I think fix the confusion of the first line, because, you know, we don't want people to be confused with the first line of our stories. Nothing whatsoever in that realm. That is it for the tale. What did you think? Let me know in the comments. Did I personify this bridge well enough? Did I craft a story without a character, or characterize something inanimate? Let me know. I think it was okay. It was a great experiment, and I think, again, like I always say, these short stories are ways for you to experiment with very different things, very different styles of writing, POVs, all manner of things. So if you feel like you're in a rut, try a short story. A very short story, like 1,000 words or less. So if you liked the video, give me a like. If you enjoy story-related content, consider subscribing. You can buy my books down in the description below as well. Coming out with me on my Discord, where we talk about books and movies and writing itself. So on that note, keep reading, keep writing, and I will see you next week. Thanks. Bye. If you'd like to read the story in its non-video format, check the link in the description. I didn't edit anything else, promise. Thanks again.